Chapter 367. The Demon God's Sleeping Palace. Since it's an empty palace, should we go in and take a look? Bai Li Pang Pang curiously glanced into the grand hall. I'm afraid we have no choice but to go in. And Qing Yu moved aside the bright red door, frowning as she said, "This door seems to be locked from the outside. It can't be opened from the inside at all." "Can't open it?" Li Deyong glanced at the frail and Qing Yu, skeptically walked to the door and pulled on it a few times with force, only to find it completely immovable. He couldn't help but voice his confusion. That shouldn't be the case. It was quite easy to push the door open just now. Chao Yuan sighed and slowly swept the beam of his flashlight across the hall. "If we can't open the door, then let's go in and see if we can find another way out." The four of them stepped forward, cautiously observing their surroundings as they began to move deeper into the grand hall. The front of the hall was empty, with nothing but a few sturdy giant pillars, until they reached the center of the hall, where a massive throne adorned with gilded carvings appeared. This throne was at least 30 meters high, and with the intricately carved backrest, its overall height was nearly 70 meters. If it weren't for the high ceiling of the hall, this chair alone would likely break through the roof. Bai Li Pang Pang shone the flashlight beam over the giant throne, unable to help but exclaim, "This chair is way too big, right? This is the seat of the deities guarding this heavenly palace. It's normal for deities to be large. I bet the throne of the king of Fengdu is even bigger," Chao Yuan explained. He turned around and saw Qing Yu with her head down, seemingly lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" Chao Yuan asked as he walked over to her. Qing Yu adjusted her glasses. "Do you remember that grayish-blue wall we saw when we entered?" "Of course. There's one thing I don't quite understand," Qing Yu pondered aloud. "If this is indeed the legendary Fengdu, then why is there a wall built by the Han dynasty outside of Fengdu?" Chao Yuan was momentarily stunned by her words. The existence of Fengdu must predate the Han dynasty. Since they built a wall outside, it indicates that someone in the Han dynasty must have discovered Fengdu. Back then, constructing such a large wall underground would have required a massive amount of manpower and resources. The most crucial point is that such a significant project left no trace in historical records. Qing Yu shook her head. "I don't understand why they would do that." Chao Yuan pondered for a moment. Could it be that some emperor made a pact with Fengdu in pursuit of immortality? That's possible, but if that's the case, why build a wall? Qing Yu asked, puzzled. If the emperor sought longevity, wouldn't he offer tributes instead? A wall like that seems to suggest a fear of something escaping from Fengdu. Escaping? Chao Yuan thought for a moment. Could it be some kind of mystery? No, that's not right. Mystery should have only appeared after the fog descended 100 years ago. The timeline doesn't match. Qing Yu raised an eyebrow at his words. Why do you think there was no mystery before the fog descended? If mystery existed before the fog descended without any night watchman, wouldn't the great Xia have been in chaos long ago? Chao Yuan replied matter-of-factly. Qing Yu gave him a meaningful look. But before the fog descended, we had gods. Chao Yuan froze in place, shock evident in his eyes. Are you saying that mystery might have existed before the fog descended, and the reason the great Xia didn't fall into chaos was that there were deities secretly protecting it? Qing Yu nodded. This is just my personal speculation. After all, there's no evidence to suggest that mystery existed before the fog descended. Chao Yuan glanced at the massive throne and sighed. Regardless, that wall is indeed strange. But for now, we should focus on finding a way to leave. The four of them walked around the throne and followed the side passage to the back of the hall, which opened into a much larger space. However, the furnishings here were more numerous compared to the front hall. There was a bed, a table, and a black bookshelf filled with scrolls. In the corner there were even some burnt incense. "This is a bedroom?" Bai Li Pang Pang asked suspiciously. "This is called a sleeping palace." Chao Yuan rolled his eyes. "If I'm not mistaken, this should be the sleeping palace of the deities guarding this heavenly palace. Do gods need to sleep too?" Chao Yuan directly ignored Bai Li Pang Pang's question and quietly stepped forward to examine the area with his flashlight. Although these furnishings looked quite ordinary from the perspective of the gods, they were colossal objects in the eyes of Chao Yuan and the others. Especially the bed, which was nearly the size of 2 football fields. Searching this room thoroughly would take an unknown amount of time. While Bai Li Pang Pang was still seriously contemplating whether gods needed to sleep, and Qing Yu had already reached under the bookshelf, scanning the titles of the scrolls with his flashlight. Suddenly his gaze stopped on one scroll. A few threads shot out from his hand, tugging at the edge of the scroll. With a strong pull he took it down from the high shelf. "What is this?" Li Diyang asked, walking over in confusion. And Qing Yu spread the scroll on the ground, quickly scanning the words on it, and paused slightly. He looked up at Chao Yuan, who had also approached, and slowly said, "I think I understand how that wall came to be." Lin Chiyi was dodging the paper soldiers along the way while quickly moving toward the direction from which the sound had just come. Fortunately, Bai Li Pang Pang and the others had already drawn away most of the paper soldiers, so the journey was relatively smooth, aside from the constant chilling winds blowing around, which felt eerie. Although Lin Chiyi couldn't see them, after his recent interaction with the owner of the courtyard, he could guess that these cold winds were actually some invisible spirits. Soon he saw the house that Bai Li Pang Pang had collapsed, which was also the direction from which the sound had come. However, this place was now completely empty. Which direction did they go? Lin Chiyi frowned, glancing at the path he had taken, his gaze extending along the road beneath his feet into the distance. There a series of black palaces stood majestically. Are these the palaces left by the deities? Lin Chiyi hesitated for only a moment before stepping toward the towering palaces. Judging by the route, Bai Li Pang Pang and the others must have entered one of those palaces. Chapter 368. The Ancient Coffin in the Palace. At this moment the paper figures surrounding the outer hall had already dispersed. Lin Chia moved silently like a ghost in the dark, approaching the majestic group of halls. His spiritual energy swept across the exterior of these halls, and he frowned slightly. Due to the materials of these halls, he was unable to perceive the situation inside. He could only wander around the periphery, sensing the enormous plaques hanging outside the halls with his spiritual energy. Zhouju Yin Tian Palace, Tai Shaliang Shizong Tian Palace, Mingchen Nai Fan Wuqing Tian Palace, Tian Zhao Zui Qi Tian Palace, Zong Ling Qi Fei Tian Palace, Gonsi Lian Wan Lv Tian Palace. Standing before this palace, Lin Chia sighed helplessly. If he couldn't sense the situation inside the halls, how was he supposed to find where Bai Li Pang Pang and the others were? Moreover, they probably didn't know the rule that the dead could enter but the living could not exit, and they were likely trapped in one of the halls. Should he search one by one? But once he entered, he wouldn't be able to come out either. After pondering for a moment, Lin Chia's eyes lit up as he suddenly thought of a good idea. He quickly walked to the nearest Mingchen Nai Fan Wuqing Tian Palace and pushed open the crimson door. Just like when he opened the courtyard door earlier, it felt weightless, as if it had no mass at all. As Lin Chia stepped behind the door, he didn't let it close. 2 summoning magic circles blossomed behind him, and in the next moment 2 figures dressed in blue worker uniforms stood behind him. Li Yifei, holding half a carrot and wearing an apron, was momentarily stunned, looking around in confusion before his gaze finally landed on Lin Chia. "Chia, you rarely call me out, huh?" After confirming that he had been summoned away from the asylum of the gods, Li Yifei immediately became excited, tossing aside the carrot in his hand, tearing off his apron and grinning widely. Since being taken into the asylum of the gods, he hadn't been able to come out again. After being cooped up for nearly 2 years, he was finally seeing the light of day. Just now, Aju was still saying to me, "Look, he's performing well, let me give him an extra chicken leg tonight," Li Yifei said while stretching his limbs and playfully patting Aju's head. Upon hearing this, Aju's small body trembled and his lips began to quiver. Actually... Aju's gaze darted away from Lin Chia, his little face pale as if he was about to cry at any moment. Lin Chia looked at him with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Seeing Aju's pitiful appearance, he waved his hand. Go ahead, go ahead." Aju was taken aback, raising his tear-filled eyes, looking gratefully at Lin Chia. "Thank you, Director." Lin Chia nodded silently. "Well, with this connection he should be able to work harder for me next time. By the way, Chia, where is this? Why is it so cold?" Li Yifei looked around, rubbing his arms, unable to suppress a shiver. "Oh, this is hell." Li Yifei's mouth twitched slightly. "I suddenly remembered I haven't finished cooking. How about this? Let Aju accompany you and I'll go back to cook. Grandma's teeth have been getting better lately, and it seems like the dishes I prepared today won't be enough." Lin Chia rolled his eyes. It's just a desolate Fengdu and you don't need to take risks. Your task is simply to hold this door open and not let it close. Li Yifei was taken aback. Is it really that simple? Yes, it's that simple. Alright then, it's just guarding the door. Leave it to me. Li Yifei patted his chest confidently. Lin Qie nodded and turned to walk into the hall. Since the doors here cannot be opened from the inside by the living, all he needed to do was ensure they couldn't close. If it were someone else it might be a bit troublesome, but Lin Qie had plenty of workers. Guarding the door didn't require him to do it personally. As for why he summoned 2 people, he was worried that with Zhu's personality, if anything happened while he wasn't around, Zhu might faint from fright, and if the door closed then, it would be quite a mess. Besides, one couldn't always just catch 1 sheep to shear. Sometimes it was good to catch 2 at once. In the darkness, Lin Qie stepped deeper into the hall, and suddenly he seemed to sense something stopping just before the threshold. In the center of the hall, black cross-shaped wooden frames were neatly arranged, each one hanging a set of bronze armor. The armors were spaced less than a meter apart, densely packed within the hall, and at a glance, there were nearly 300 of them. Lin Qie frowned slightly, softly reciting a verse, and a flicker of fire ignited at his fingertips. For some reason in this dim and grand black hall, the flame in Lin Qie's hand turned a deep green, as if an invisible force in the air was suppressing all light. Holding this ghostly green flame, Lin Qie slowly moved through the dense array of bronze armors. Under the eerie glow, the rusted surfaces of the bronze armors were covered in dark red blood scabs, with jagged gashes as if they had been cut by some sharp weapon. Some armors were relatively intact with not too many bloodstains, while others were shattered and barely hanging on the frames. As Lin Qie passed through the array of armors and looked back, a look of confusion appeared in his eyes. All the wounds on these armors seemed to come from the front, with their backs completely intact, which meant that the owners of these armors had never suffered attacks from behind. But how could that be possible? If it were on a battlefield, how could one only encounter enemies from the front? To cause such wounds, it could only happen in a relatively narrow space, facing an oncoming enemy, and even if there were heavy casualties, no one turned to flee, no one retreated. When the frontline warriors fell, the ones behind would step up. What were they protecting? Lin Qie's mind simulated the scene, and this thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. He turned his head, following the direction that the backs of these bronze armors faced. At the far end of these bronze armors, before the dark throne of the divine, a red carved square coffin lay quietly on the stone platform. This coffin was about 2 meters long with sharp edges, resembling a neatly crafted cube. The surface of the coffin was intricately carved with numerous patterns in black, dazzling to the eye. From a distance, it looked like a long box with a red base and black patterns. Lin Qie approached the coffin, his gaze falling on the complex patterns on its surface. After staring for a long time, a look of astonishment appeared in his eyes. Chapter 369. Opening the coffin. His spiritual power also could not penetrate the surface of the coffin. If he guessed correctly, this grand hall should be the legendary Luofeng Tian, the residence of the ghostly deities guarding the palace. But why was there a coffin in this abode of spirits? Moreover, Lin Qie was certain that this coffin was definitely not meant for a deity, as the illustrations on its surface were filled with the essence of ancient scrolls. However, Lin Qie was not well versed in history or art, and for the moment he could not deduce the specific dynasty from the images. Additionally, the size of this coffin was far too small compared to the physique of the ghostly deities. How could a deity capable of sitting on a throne over 30 meters high possibly fit into such a small coffin after death? Lin Qie crouched down and carefully observed the illustrations on the coffin's surface. The first image depicted a figure in blue clothing standing atop an altar, with various offerings laid out before him, including fruits, wild beasts, and even gold. Kneeling in the open space before the altar were numerous figures, seemingly worshipping his existence. The second image featured the same blue-clad figure, but this time he stood before a burning palace surrounded by ruins. His body was covered in blood, and many green soldiers stood before him, battling against a tide of strange creatures. The third image showed a man in royal robes standing before another palace, with a black-red coffin placed in front of him. The blue-clad figure had one foot stepping into the coffin, as if he was about to lie down inside. In the fourth image, the blue-clad figure had vanished, replaced by numerous black-armored soldiers. At the front of their formation they carried a black-red coffin, moving towards a half-open bronze giant door. The scene ended there. Lin Chia furrowed his brow and slowly stood up from beside the coffin, lost in thought. The information gleaned from these 4 images was limited, and the story seemed full of mysteries to Lin Chia. Who was that blue-clad figure? Why were so many people offering him worship? What were those strange creatures surrounding the palace? However, from the last 2 images, it was clear that the blue-clad figure lay in the coffin, then was sent through the bronze giant door by an army, and beyond that door was naturally Fengdu. Why did they send this coffin into Fengdu? And why was it stored within a heavenly palace? Lin Chia shook his head, putting aside these complicated thoughts. He shifted his gaze away from the coffin and turned to walk out of the hall. No matter how mysterious the story of this coffin was, it was an event that happened hundreds or even thousands of years ago. He had no interest in playing a decoding game here. Since he had confirmed that Bailey Pang Pang and the others were not here, it was time to search another palace. But just as he turned around, a faint sound suddenly echoed in the empty hall. Dong! Lin Chia abruptly halted his steps. Every muscle in his body tensed instantly, and his spiritual power extended to its limits, sweeping through every corner of the hall. There was nothing unusual. All the armor and items were neatly arranged in their original positions, and his spiritual power had never been withdrawn. Just a moment ago there was definitely nothing else present in this hall. Another ghost? Lin Chia stood tense in the darkness for a long time. Seeing that nothing strange occurred, he slowly began to move toward the hall's entrance again. Dong! The second faint sound echoed again. This time Lin Chia heard it clearly. He quickly turned around, his gaze locking onto the black-red coffin lying quietly on the stone platform. One hand gripped the hilt of the straight knife at his back, ready to draw it at any moment. He stared intently at the coffin, beads of sweat forming on his back, his expression extremely serious. The sound was coming from inside the coffin. A coffin that had been sealed in the ghost city of Fengdu for an unknown number of years. How could this be possible? If there was a ghost lying in the coffin, it should have lost its soul after such a long time, right? Lin Chia focused on the black-red coffin, gently lifting his foot and taking a step back toward the hall's entrance. Dong! As expected, the third sound rang out again. Not only that, but after this sound emerged, the surrounding bronze armor trembled simultaneously, as if they were coming to life, eerily tilting slightly toward Lin Chia. Lin Chia retracted his foot, pondering for a moment before slowly stepping toward the coffin again. This time there was no sound at all. Only when moving away from it did it make a sound, but approaching it did not. Lin Chia grasped the pattern of the sound's emergence, and his confusion deepened. Could it be that whatever was inside the coffin did not want him to leave? Standing among the numerous armors, Lin Chia found himself in a stalemate, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Should he just run toward the hall's entrance? What if the sound from the coffin occurred multiple times, causing the surrounding bronze armor to undergo a transformation? After the lesson with the paper soldiers, Lin Chia understood that the soldiers and strange powers within Fengdu belonged to the realm of divine phenomena, far beyond what he could currently handle. If these eerie bronze armors were to awaken, he would likely fall into extreme danger. But if he didn't run, was he just going to waste time standing here? Lin Chia struggled in place for a long time before a sudden thought struck him. Clang! He drew a straight knife from his back with one hand, slowly pulling it from its sheath. Since I can't walk over, I'll use the reverse summoning magic array of the straight knife to teleport out. That should work, right? But just as Lin Chia pulled the blade from its sheath, the long knives behind the bronze armors also emitted a faint sound, eerily extending outward as if an invisible hand was gripping the hilt, pulling them out. 300 long knives were drawn simultaneously. Lin Chia's hand, which was halfway through drawing his knife, suddenly froze. After hesitating for a moment, he silently sheathed the knife back. Clang! 300 long knives returned to their sheaths. In the dark hall, 300 pieces of armor stood silently as if nothing had happened. Lin Chia. In this hall, even drawing a knife doesn't work? Lin Chia looked at the armors with a headache. After pondering for a moment, he gritted his teeth and took large strides directly toward the black-red coffin at the center. No unusual occurrences happened. Lin Chia smoothly walked up to the coffin and stopped. You won't let me leave and you won't let me draw my knife. What exactly do you want? Lin Chia furrowed his brow, staring at the coffin in front of him, murmuring to himself. The coffin lay quietly before him, utterly silent. Lin Chia took a deep breath, slowly placing his hands on the edge of the coffin lid, while his eyes glimmered with a brilliant golden light. He could no longer afford to waste time here. No matter what was inside the coffin, he had to resolve it. Otherwise he would never be able to leave this hall. With strength that could move mountains and a spirit that could overshadow the world, Lin Chia's hands suddenly exerted force. With a dull thud, the black-red coffin lid was slowly lifted by Lin Chia. Chapter 370, John. As the coffin lid was lifted, a strange fragrance suddenly filled Lin Chia's nostrils. His gaze was fixed on the gap of the coffin, and upon seeing the scene beneath the coffin lid, he was momentarily stunned. On the smooth black coffin lid lay a girl dressed in a deep blue robe. Her fair skin was delicate, her long black hair framed her exquisite features, and her soft pink lips were slightly pursed, above which was a nose as white as jade. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly and her star-like brilliant eyes slowly opened. Lin Chia stared blankly at the girl in the coffin, his eyes filled with shock. Person? How could it be a person? Lin Chia's mind scanned the girl's body. Human organs, a human brain, human blood, human appearance. Everything seemed to confirm that she was indeed a person. Before opening the coffin, Lin Chia had boldly imagined what might be inside, such as a 1,000-year-old zombie with a yellow talisman on its forehead, a ghost transformed into an evil spirit, or a blood corpse filled with resentment. Even if a creature like Benbo Erba had jumped out, Lin Chia wouldn't have found it strange. But instead, it was a living person. What kind of person could lie in this Fengdu Heavenly Palace's coffin for hundreds or thousands of years? Not to mention decay, there wasn't even a single wrinkle on her body. Her skin was as delicate as white jade, her hair flowed like a waterfall, and even the deep blue robe she wore was as pristine as new, untouched by dust. Who could believe that such a girl would lie in this eerie and strange coffin of the Fengdu Heavenly Palace? The girl's gaze fixed on Lin Chia's face, her dazed eyes slowly focusing, revealing a look of confusion. With great difficulty she sat up from the coffin lid. Her long black hair slid down the deep blue satin, cascading over her shoulders. She tilted her delicate neck to look around, her bright eyes reflecting a sense of being in another world. Lin Chia, seeing the blue-clad girl, instantly recalled the images on the coffin's surface. Those paintings of a figure worshipped by others stepping into the coffin were actually of a woman? Lin Chia opened his mouth, about to ask something, when suddenly, a thunderous sound of unsheathing a sword echoed through the hall. Clang! Lin Chia's expression changed drastically. He turned to look and saw that the bronze armors, which had originally faced the hall door, had somehow turned to face him. Strange black smoke poured out from the gaps in the armor, quickly coalescing into human forms. The long swords behind these bronze armors had already been drawn. The shadowy figures clad in bronze armor held long swords, their cold blades pointed straight at Lin Chia, eerie green light emanating from beneath their helmets, and a powerful aura of death instantly enveloped the entire hall. 300 bronze armors, 300 killing swords. The black smoke surged and all the bronze armors detached from the hanging wooden frames, gripping their long swords, swiftly floating towards Lin Chia. Seeing this, Lin Chia's eyes narrowed slightly. He took a deep breath and drew the two straight swords from his back. What was meant to come had finally arrived. With both hands gripping the swords, an extreme darkness spread beneath his feet, the golden light in his eyes reigniting, and the collar of his black shirt flapped violently in the wind stirred up by the 300 bronze armors. At that moment, the blue-clad girl furrowed her brow slightly and lifted her foot to step out of the coffin. Perhaps due to her joints not having moved for a long time, she lost her balance as her foot touched the ground and fell heavily. As the 300 bronze armors rushed towards her, the blue-clad girl gritted her silver teeth, quickly got up from the ground and stumbled towards Lin Chia. Just as Lin Chia was about to swing his sword, he froze in place. The blue-clad girl, barefoot, rushed in front of Lin Chia, turned around to face the oncoming 300 bronze armors, and opened her arms to shield Lin Chia behind her. The wide sleeves of her Han-style robe were blown up by the wind from the 300 bronze armors. The girl's star-like bright eyes gazed steadfastly ahead, a cold long sword poised just half an inch from her forehead, ready to strike her face. All the bronze armors halted their movements, and the entire hall fell into a deathly silence. The blue-clad girl's gaze swept over the 300 bronze armors. Her lips parted slightly, and after much effort, a vague and somewhat hoarse syllable escaped her mouth. Retreat. As this voice rang out, the long swords wrapped in black smoke simultaneously returned to their sheaths, and all the bronze armors retreated like a tide, returning to their respective wooden frames. As the black smoke dissipated, the eerie green glow beneath the bronze helmets gradually dimmed, eventually disappearing without a trace. The 300 bronze armors hung quietly on the wooden frames, just as they had when Lin Chia first entered the hall, as if everything that had just happened was merely an illusion. Having witnessed the entire process, Lin Chia stood behind the blue-clad girl, his brow tightly furrowed, his heart filled with deepening confusion. After hesitating for a moment, he sheathed his swords, and the golden light in his eyes quickly receded. "Who are you?" Lin Chia looked at the blue-clad girl's back and asked in a deep voice. The blue-clad girl turned around, her bright eyes gazing at Lin Chia's face for a moment, then curved gently like a crescent moon, her smile radiant. She opened her lips, trying hard to say something, but only vague syllables came out. After several attempts, the blue-clad girl stomped her foot in frustration, her delicate brows tightly knitted, showing a look of distress. Lin Chia pondered for a moment and tentatively asked, "Have you forgotten how to speak because you haven't talked for too long?" The blue-clad girl nodded vigorously. Lin Chia sighed helplessly. "Then I ask you gesture." The blue-clad girl blinked. "Is the person depicted on this coffin you?" Lin Chia pointed to the first image on the coffin showing the blue-clad figure and asked. The blue-clad girl nodded. "Have you been in this coffin all this time?" The blue-clad girl nodded again. Lin Chia's brow furrowed slightly. "How long have you been in there?" The blue-clad girl hesitated for a moment, uncertainly extending two fingers. 200 years. Lin Chia asked in surprise. The blue-clad girl shook her head. Lin Chia was taken aback, opened his mouth and tentatively asked, 2,000 years? The blue-clad girl nodded. Seeing her nod, Lin Chia's mind was in turmoil and he stood there in shock. Putting aside the fact that a human could not possibly live for 2,000 years, even lying in a dark, cramped space like a coffin for 2 days would be enough to drive any mentally mature man insane. Lying there for 2 years was even more unimaginable. But this girl before him had actually lain in the coffin for 2,000 years? For 2,000 years no one spoke, no light at all, and she couldn't even move her arms. The only companions she had were endless darkness and silence. How did she manage that? Lin Chia stared at the girl for a long time before slowly asking another question. "What is your name?" The blue-clad girl was taken aback, lowered her head in thought for a long time, seemingly trying to figure out how to gesture her name. After a moment she gave up struggling, quickly walked to Lin Chia's front, opened his palm, and gently wrote 2 characters on his hand with her fingertip. Jialan. Chapter 371. The Immortal Girl. The Wall from the Han Dynasty. Bai Li Pang wandered around the ghostly palace and upon hearing this, moved closer to Qingyu, asking to see which ancient person was so idle. Qingyu. Go ahead and speak. Chao Yuan and Li Diang also approached Qingyu. Qingyu adjusted his glasses and slowly began to speak. If I'm not mistaken, this heavenly palace should be a place for storing records of strange occurrences that happen in the mortal realm, and the record I have in my hand describes an unusual event from the Han Dynasty. During the Han Dynasty, a strange girl suddenly appeared among the people. She possessed the power to bestow the characteristic of immortality on any object she touched, and objects endowed with this immortality would not be affected by any external factors. Her clothes would not suffer any damage from knives or fire, and a wooden axe she had touched could cut through gold and stone. The arrows she shot could easily pierce heavy armor. Moreover, she herself was impervious to blades and bullets. Flames could not leave burns on her skin and corrosive substances could not leave any traces on her. Even time lost its effect on her. No matter how many years passed, her appearance would not show any signs of aging. However, there was a flaw. She could only bestow the immortality characteristic on one object at a time. While she granted immortality to an arrow, she would lose her own protective immortality and become as vulnerable as an ordinary person. But strangely, even after losing her protective immortality, she would still not age, as if her own time had been eternally frozen. Due to this almost miraculous power, she was revered by the local people as a messenger of the gods, who worshipped her daily, hoping to receive her protection and achieve immortality themselves. The emperor of the time heard of this matter and summoned her to the palace, treating her as a distinguished guest, seeking her advice on the secret to immortality. He even granted her 300 bronze warriors, vowing to protect her safety at all costs. Suddenly, one day, mysterious monsters surged forth from the void like a tide, attacking the strange girl with the power of immortality. To everyone's astonishment, these monsters possessed the ability to break the immortality characteristic and easily injured the girl. The 300 bronze warriors fought valiantly to protect her against the monsters, but ultimately they were all wiped out, though the monsters also mysteriously vanished. After hearing of this incident, the emperor believed the girl to be a harbinger of disaster, uncertain of when she might attract another monster attack, which would be detrimental to the nation. He ordered the construction of a coffin made of mysterious wood that could isolate all breath, sealing the girl inside, and sent the coffin to Fengdu. After that, the emperor remained uneasy and secretly had a wall built near Fengdu, so that if those monsters ever returned to kill the girl, even if they broke out of Fengdu, they could be stopped by the wall and prevented from entering the mortal realm, thus avoiding harm to the state. And Qingyu closed the record in his hand, and the others around him fell into deep thought. Immortality. Li Diyang frowned slightly. Does such power really exist? And from this description it sounds so much like the Forbidden Ruins. Chao Yuan continued his thought. Yes, it feels similar to the Forbidden Ruins, but from what I know of the Forbidden Ruins sequence, there doesn't seem to be such a Forbidden Ruins. But, didn't the Forbidden Ruins only appear after the mist descended? Bai Li Pang asked in confusion. This was over 2,000 years ago. How could there have been Forbidden Ruins back then? Chao Yuan nodded. The Forbidden Ruins indeed only appeared after the mist descended. This has long been verified by the Night Watchers. Either her power was not from the Forbidden Ruins at all, or she might be the earliest known possessor of a Forbidden Ruins in the world. Sounds pretty impressive. Li Diyang nodded. However, it seems unrelated to us. Bai Li Pang stood up from the ground, grinning. That's not necessarily true. Isn't she immortal? What if she's still alive today, lying in some coffin? Uncle Li is right. The urgent task at hand is to find a way out. Chao Yuan scanned the palace, his brow slightly furrowed. However, this grand hall is completely sealed. Aside from the entrance we came in, there seems to be no other exit. Bai Li Pang pondered for a moment. How about I give it a try? The other three turned to look at him, their expressions somewhat surprised. I have an item that can traverse space. A forbidden object, but since we're in the Heavenly Palace, I'm not sure if it will work. Bai Li Pang shrugged. Why didn't you take it out earlier? Li Diyang asked, frustrated. This thing is a consumable. Once it's used up, it's gone. There's only one of its kind in the world. Bai Li Pang pulled a piece of chalk from his pocket, looking a bit pained. He squatted down in a corner of the hall and drew a large circle on the wall with the chalk. As the powder connected at the ends, the wall within the circle suddenly rippled and the circular wall vanished. It works. Bai Li Pang's eyes lit up. Hurry over. This thing can only hold for 10 seconds. The other three, seeing this scene, showed expressions of joy and immediately rushed through the chalk circle. Once the last one and Qingyu stepped out, the circle connecting to the outside world disappeared. Chao Yuan shone his flashlight around. They were no longer at the main entrance of the grand hall they had entered before, but at the back of the hall, where a winding path extended forward. At the end of the path, a magnificent red palace floated in mid-air. This floating palace was much larger than the palace on the ground, and its outer walls and roof were all bright red. This was almost the only non-black building the four of them had seen since entering Fengdu. The ground palace had black walls and a red door, while the floating palace before them was the opposite, red walls and a black door. That dark, gaping door stood in mid-air like an abyss. That should be the imperial palace of the Emperor of Fengdu, right? And Qingyu also looked up at the grand palace and spoke. It should be correct. Chao Yuan nodded. Bai Li Pang surveyed the imposing floating palace and couldn't help but smacked his lips. Should we go take a look? No. Chao Yuan decisively refused. We're here to find Qi Yi, not for sightseeing. Fine. Bai Li Pang Pang sighed in disappointment. At that moment, a wave of white paper figures suddenly swept across the sky. Chao Yuan and the others' expressions changed, and they quickly pressed against the wall of the palace to hide their figures. Fortunately, those paper figures didn't seem to be coming for the four of them. They merely swept over the top of the palace and flew upward. Chao Yuan peeked out, squinting at the front of the wave of paper figures, and suddenly froze in place. At the very front of the wave of paper figures, a giant white ant was rapidly crawling on the ground, moving directly up the floating black stone slab toward the floating palace. Chapter 372. The Ant Queen Being Pursued. Ant Queen. Chao Yuan exclaimed in surprise upon seeing the giant ant. And Qingyu squinted slightly. It seemed that those paper figures were the guardians of this Fengdu. After the giant ant was chased into Fengdu by Qie, it exposed its whereabouts and attracted the pursuit of the paper figures. In that case, could Qie also be nearby? Bai Li Pang Pang looked around. Not for the moment. And Qingyu pondered and spoke, but with such a commotion from the paper figures chasing the ant queen, if he were nearby, he would definitely see it and come over. So, does that mean if we secretly follow the ant queen we can find Qie? Compared to running around like headless flies, this should be the most reliable method. And Qingyu nodded, but we must keep our distance from the ant queen and the paper figures. Otherwise we would be the ones in trouble. The four nodded in agreement. Once the group of paper figures chasing the ant queen completely disappeared above the floating palace, they began to move, following the winding path toward the floating palace. At the end of the path was a series of massive floating stone slabs, extending from the ground all the way up to the sky, resembling a staircase leading to a red palace. Bai Li Pang Pang and the others stepped directly onto the first stone slab. It was unclear how these slabs floated, but they bore the weight of 3 people without any noticeable wobble. They focused on the floating palace above and quickly rushed upward. At the back of the group, Li Diang also stepped onto the first stone slab. Buzz. As Li Diang's foot landed on the first stone slab, it visibly trembled. His body suddenly froze in place. Thunk. Lin Qie felt the characters in his hand and murmured. Jialan looked up into Lin Qie's eyes. Hearing him call her name, a smile appeared on her lips and she nodded. Boom. A muffled sound came from outside the hall, as if a fierce battle was taking place. Lin Qie suddenly raised his head and looked toward the hall's entrance, his expression changing slightly. Are you human? Lin Qie turned to Jialan and asked this question seriously. Jialan was taken aback, hesitated for a moment, then nodded again. Good. Lin Qie's gaze fell outside the hall. I'll take you out. He grabbed Jialan's wrist and quickly dashed through the bronze armor array toward the hall's exit. However, after just a couple of steps, Jialan stumbled and nearly fell. Lin Qie turned back as if he had thought of something. Sorry, I forgot you had been lying in the coffin for so long and might not be able to walk well. After hesitating for a moment, Lin Qie took off the twin blades from his back and slightly crouched down, turning his back to the girl in blue. Come on, I'll carry you. Jialan paused for a moment, her cheeks slightly flushed, but she didn't hesitate and climbed onto Lin Qie's back, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. A gentle breath brushed past Lin Qie's ear. Through the thin black shirt he could clearly feel the warmth of the girl on his back. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, and his mind was filled with a single thought. Yes, confirmed, she's alive. He picked up the twin blades from the ground and was about to leave when Jialan gently tapped his shoulder and pointed to a wooden rack in the corner of the hall. On that rack hung a light yellow hardwood bough and a quiver woven from bamboo leaves. Is that yours? Lin Qie turned to ask. Jialan behind him nodded. Lin Qie quickly walked over, took the hardwood bough and quiver from the rack, and handed them to Jialan. She gazed at the hardwood bough, gently caressing it for a long time before solemnly strapping it to her back. Lin Qie, carrying Jialan, swiftly ran out of the hall. Li Yifei and Azhu, who were bored waiting at the hall's entrance, were shocked to see him come out carrying a woman, their mouths agape. Tie, where did you come from? Li Yifei asked in confusion. How did one person go in and 2 come out? Lin Qie shook his head, saying there was no time to explain. I'll go out first and we can talk more at the hospital. Seeing Lin Qie's serious expression, Li Yifei nodded. Alright, see you at the hospital. 2 beams of magical light burst forth from Azhu and Li Yifei, and in an instant they disappeared. The hall door, losing its support, slowly began to close, and Lin Chia's figure swayed before returning to the outside. He looked back and saw several figures running up the floating stone slabs toward the massive vermilion floating palace, about to enter. Without any hesitation, Lin Chia also rushed toward the vermilion palace. He ran to the edge of the floating stone slabs and saw Li Diang standing dazedly on the first slab, looking up at the floating palace, seemingly lost in thought. "Uncle Li, why are you dazed here?" Lin Chia ran to his side and asked in confusion. It's nothing." Li Diang shook his head and pointed to the floating palace above. "Those three have already gone in and the Ant Queen is inside too. You should hurry and help them." Lin Chia nodded, then suddenly realized something. "Aren't you going?" "I will." Li Diang looked down at the stone slab beneath his feet and spoke slowly, "But I might need some more time." After hesitating for a moment, Lin Chia patted his shoulder. "Uncle Li, your realm is too low. It's already impressive that you made it this far. Leave the rest to us, you shouldn't take any risks." Li Diang's mouth twitched slightly and he said irritably, "Go on, don't embarrass me here." His peripheral vision caught sight of the girl on Lin Chia's back, and he suddenly froze, a look of surprise appearing on his face. "I rescued her from a heavenly palace. I'll explain the details later. I'm going up first." Lin Chia stepped forward, his figure darting toward the palace above like a startled swan, disappearing in an instant. Li Diang stared blankly at their departing figures and sighed deeply. He slowly took a step forward and stepped onto the second stone slab. Buzz. The stone slab trembled again, this time with a greater intensity than when he stepped on the first slab. Bai Li Pangpang chased after the Ant Queen and the paper figures, stepping onto the last stone slab, standing before the Vermilion Imperial Palace. At the top of the palace, a white giant ant was rapidly climbing up the red giant pillar, surrounded by numerous paper figures floating in the air, circling around the palace's apex like a white paper cloud. However, they seemed to fear the palace itself, not daring to enter its vicinity. The Ant Queen appeared to have anticipated this scene, clinging to the wall at the very top of the palace, silently roaring at the paper cloud in the sky. Chapter 373. The Arrow of Kalen. Under the provocation of the Ant Queen, the paper figure in the sky seemed incredibly furious, its pale face on the paper twisting as it rapidly circled outside the palace. Bai Li Pangpang and Qingyu and Chao Yuan pressed closely against the black palace door, their expressions changing slightly at the sight of the paper figure's almost frenzied demeanor. At this moment, a large number of paper figures atop the towering pillars had already noticed their presence and began to approach. "Where is Uncle Li?" Bai Li Pangpang suddenly realized something and looked around. "It seems he didn't follow us when we were climbing the stone slabs." And Qingyu continued. Hearing this, Chao Yuan felt a sense of relief. It was better this way. This place is too dangerous and his cultivation level isn't sufficient. If something happens, we might not be able to protect him. Bai Li Pangpang looked up. "What should we do now? More and more paper figures are gathering around us. Hey, why aren't they going to kill that Ant Queen? That Ant Queen seems very familiar with the situation here, knowing where to avoid the paper figures' attacks. She must have entered Fengdu before." And Qingyu pondered aloud. Chao Yuan stared at the increasing number of paper figures in the sky, furrowing his brows for a moment before placing a hand on the black door behind him. "If it comes to it, we can just go inside and hide. After all, with Pong Pong's chalk we can come out any time." Upon hearing this, Bai Li Pangpang's expression immediately turned sour. He felt a bit pained about his chalk, but compared to his own life he was more willing to part with his possessions to avoid disaster. Chao Yuan pushed open the pitch-black door with force, and a chilling, cold aura rushed toward them. Lin Chia carried Jialan on his back, quickly advancing along the suspended stone slabs toward the red palace above. He squinted at the top of the Imperial Palace, seeing the dense paper figures circling in the sky, along with the Ant Queen hiding at the palace's peak, provoking the paper figures. She knows the paper figures dare not enter the palace, so she feels fearless. Lin Chia saw through the truth at a glance. After all, she had descended into Fengdu 2 years ago, and by then she must have figured out some of the rules here, or she wouldn't have been able to escape to the outside world. Jialan gazed at the Ant Queen atop the palace, pondering for a moment before tentatively asking, "Are you going to kill her?" Lin Chia nodded. "We came here to kill her." Jialan thought for a moment, then reached behind her to take out a light yellow hardwood bough. She drew an arrow from the quiver, knocked it on the bowstring, and with her slender fingers she pulled the bowstring back slowly. Seeing this, Lin Chia was suddenly taken aback. "What are you doing?" "Shooting her down." Jialan aimed the arrow at the ant queen atop the palace, her bright eyes narrowing slightly. The blue robe fluttered in the wind as Lin Chia ran, a faint white light gathering at the sharp arrowhead. In that moment, Lin Chia distinctly felt a strange aura gathering behind him, accompanied by a subtle sense of pressure. "Can you shoot her down from this distance?" Lin Chia instinctively slowed his pace. "No need to stop." With the bow in hand, Jialan's demeanor seemed to change slightly. She focused on the ant queen at the palace's peak and said calmly, "I may not be able to kill her, but I can definitely drive her down from the top." The feathered arrow on the bowstring gathered white light, and with a release of her fingertip, the arrow whistled through the air, instantly disappearing from Lin Chia's perception. Lin Chia's eyes widened in surprise. That arrow's speed is astonishing. At the top of the imperial palace, the ant queen, whose body had been shattered by Mumu, had almost fully recovered. She lay on the intricately carved walls of the palace, roaring wildly at the paper figures in the sky. Watching the paper figures gather in the sky, wanting to come down but daring not to, she felt an immense sense of satisfaction. Whoosh! At that moment, a glowing white feathered arrow suddenly appeared beside her. The ant queen was taken aback and instinctively tried to move to avoid it, only to realize that the arrow's target was not her, but the palace wall beneath her. The arrow struck the wall beneath her with a loud crash. The imperial palace wall, made from divine materials, surprisingly could not withstand this ordinary feathered arrow's impact, and dense cracks rapidly spread across the surface. Boom! With a loud bang, the wall beneath the ant queen shattered, and losing her balance, she thrust her sickle-like forelimbs out to grip the edge of the wall, stabilizing herself as she hung at the palace's edge. She turned to look in the direction from which the arrow had come, her fearsome mandibles opening wide as she roared angrily at Lin Chia and Jialan. Whoosh! The second arrow whistled through the air. This time the ant queen, hanging at the edge of the wall, could not evade the arrow as she had before. Despite her desperate attempts to twist her body, the feathered arrow struck her torso, embedding itself deep into her hard shell. Her massive body was jolted by the arrow's kinetic energy, her forelimbs slipping from the crevice, and she lost control, sliding off the edge of the palace, her forelimbs sparking against the crimson wall. She fell from the top of the palace. Seeing this, the countless paper figures swirling in the air seemed to go mad, rushing downward, their eerie auras intertwining as they charged toward the falling ant queen. Lin Chia, who had already reached the palace entrance, witnessed the entire process of the ant queen's body falling before him, followed by a swarm of paper figures descending from above. Fortunately, the ant queen had drawn all their attention, and none of the paper figures noticed Lin Chia and Jialan's presence. "Your arrow can actually penetrate the imperial palace? What material is it made of?" Lin Chia glanced at the damaged wall at the palace's edge, asking in surprise. Jialan smiled slightly, taking out a feathered arrow from her quiver and offering it to Lin Chia. Lin Chia examined the arrow with his spiritual sense repeatedly. No matter how he looked at it, the arrow showed no signs of abnormality. It was made from the simplest materials, and the craftsmanship was far inferior to the current bows and arrows. "With just this arrow it can penetrate the imperial palace? Is it your forbidden relic?" Lin Chia returned the arrow to Jialan, and as soon as he asked, he frowned and shook his head. No, at that time there shouldn't have been any forbidden relics. Jialan seemed to want to explain something, but she couldn't produce a complete sound and could only silently close her mouth. Lin Chia turned to look at the black palace door before him. He remembered that Bai Li Pangpang and the others had pushed open this door and entered. He placed his palm on the palace door and pushed it open with force. Chapter 374. The Start of the Suppression. The pitch-black door slowly opened and Lin Chia entered with Jialan on his back. As soon as he stepped inside, he saw 3 figures sneaking along the wall, completely still. Upon seeing Lin Chia, the 3 of them showed a hint of joy on their faces, but when they noticed the girl on Lin Chia's back, their smiles suddenly froze. The 3 exchanged glances, their expressions turning strange. "And Qingyu, dot? There's a woman on Chia's back? Chow Yuan, #, what?" There's actually a woman on Chia's back? Bailey Pang Pang. What? Chia's chastity is at risk. Lin Chia raised an eyebrow upon seeing them. What are you all doing? Sure. Bailey Pang Pang extended 2 fingers and made a silencing gesture towards Lin Chia, then pointed at the center of the imperial palace. Lin Chia was taken aback and turned to look, only to see a primitive black divine throne quietly floating in the dim hall. On that throne sat a humanoid figure, motionless, yet exuding a heart-pounding pressure. That is. Lin Chia stared blankly at the figure on the throne, a look of confusion appearing in his eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he stepped closer to where Bailey Pang Pang and the others were. Tia, why are you carrying a woman? Bailey Pang Pang, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, lowered his voice to ask as Lin Chia approached. Lin Chia pondered for a moment and replied, I found her in a palace. Found her? Bailey Pang Pang looked at Jialon suspiciously. You just found her and carried her? Yeah. Finding a beautiful woman like this is indeed quite common in novels and TV shows. But this shouldn't concern you. Bailey Pang Pang scratched his head, looking as if his worldview had been shaken. Aren't you supposed to be a repellent to the opposite sex? Besides attracting men, you actually attract women too? Lin Chia. Lin Chia silently placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. The last time he thought about killing Bailey Pang Pang was back in the training camp when this guy shamelessly wanted him to smell his feet. Lin Chia took a deep breath, suppressing the surging killing intent in his heart, and slowly spoke. So, what exactly are you all doing pressed against this wall? Chao Yuan raised his hand and pointed at the floating throne in the center of the hall. After entering, we realized there was actually someone on that throne. Although they didn't attack us, we also didn't dare to move recklessly. It feels a bit eerie here. Lin Chia glanced at the figure in midair and shook his head. I used my mental power to probe. That's not a person, it's just a piece of clothing. Hearing this, the other 3 were taken aback. Clothing? Lin Chia softly chanted, and a small flame appeared in his palm. He gently waved his hand, tossing the flame into the air, illuminating the dark hall. Under the firelight, the figure on the throne finally revealed its true form. It was a large black imperial robe intricately embroidered with golden threads, mysterious and filled with a sense of divinity. At this moment, the robe seemed to be a real person, sitting upright on the throne, its empty sleeves resting on the armrests, the hem naturally hanging down, exuding an imperial majesty, as if the Emperor of Fengdu from back in the day was still alive, protecting this land of the dead. This imperial robe is waiting for the Emperor of Fengdu to return. Lin Chia gazed at the robe in midair and sighed deeply. This city is also waiting for him to come back. 100 years have passed. Can he still return? Bailey Pang Pang couldn't help but ask. Chao Yuan pondered for a moment. As long as he enters reincarnation, he will definitely be able to return. After all, even Yang Jian has emerged. The gods of the Great Xia have begun to return. Sooner or later, the reincarnation of the Emperor of Fengdu will come here and restart Fengdu. At this moment, Lin Chia seemed to remember something and asked curiously. By the way, how did you all get into Fengdu? I thought I had blocked the entrance. Chao Yuan was taken aback. We didn't go through the entrance. We came in through the main door. The main door? Lin Chia frowned. How did you open that bronze giant door? We didn't do anything. It just opened by itself. Upon hearing this, Lin Chia froze in place. Did nothing and it opened by itself? Is it an automatic door? But if that's the case, why didn't it open when I walked to the bronze giant door back then? Lin Chia fell into deep thought. Boom. At that moment, the pitch-black door was slammed open, and a massive white figure stumbled in from outside. The once imposing Ant Queen now looked disheveled. Her body, which had been painstakingly repaired, had nearly 1/3 turned to paper, torn and tattered. A suffocating aura of death surrounded her, and half of her massive head had shriveled down, becoming a flat piece of paper, looking extremely bizarre. After rushing into the hall, she abruptly turned around and used her body to close the dark door, blocking the swarm of paper figures outside, plunging the entire hall into silence. The Ant Queen seemed exhausted, slowly turning around and suddenly spotted the 5 people by the wall, her massive body stiffening. Lin Chia and the others silently exchanged glances, seeing surprise in each other's eyes. Perhaps this is what they call fate. Lin Chia gently set Jialon down against the wall and looked into her eyes, saying seriously, You're too heavy. Carrying you on my back affects my speed. Sit here for a while. Jiaoan. Bailey Pongpong's mouth twitched uncontrollably, desperately holding back laughter. He nudged Chao Yuan beside him and whispered, "See? I told you Chia is a repellent to the opposite sex, right?" The statement, tis teeth. Chao Yuan turned his head in confusion. "I think what he said makes a lot of sense." Bailey Pang. Under Jiaolan's resentful gaze, Lin Chia slowly stood up from the ground, resting his dual swords on their sheaths, and swiftly drew both straight blades. Clay. The crisp sound of the blades echoed in the dark hall. Lin Chia gripped the dual swords, his gaze fixed on the disheveled ant queen not far away, and calmly spoke. "Fifth Reserve Team, first mysterious extermination mission. Begin." As soon as Lin Chia's words fell, the three figures behind him simultaneously surged forward, with Chao Yuan leading the charge, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, a slight smile on his lips. Straight blades unsheathed, black malevolent flames intertwined around his body, burning fiercely, and a terrifying killing intent surged from his black blade, like a mad demon fallen into hell, grinning as he charged towards the Ant Queen ahead. Chapter 375, Bloodline Sacrifice. The Ant Queen clearly sensed the threat emanating from Chao Yuan. Her body sank slightly, and then she shot forward like a sharp arrow, her massive form creating a howling wind as it cut through the air. Her sharp forelimbs slashed toward Chao Yuan's black flame-long knife. Clay. The long knife collided with her forelimbs, and a piercing hum echoed through the vast hall. The pitch-black Chao Yuan was knocked back several steps by the impact, barely managing to stop himself. In contrast, the Ant Queen fared worse. The shockwave from the collision tore apart parts of her paper-like body, completely ripping off one of her hind legs. Her agonized roar reverberated throughout the hall. It wasn't that Chao Yuan was particularly strong. On the contrary, if both had been in normal condition when delivering this strike, Chao Yuan would have definitely been the one sent flying. Unfortunately, due to the erosion of the paper man technique, a third of the Ant Queen's body had turned into paper, and even a slight movement risked tearing off parts of her body. In terms of strength, speed, and physical resilience, she was significantly hampered by her paper-like form. At the same time, two figures flashed out from behind Chao Yuan. And Qingyu's eyes were fixed intently on the Ant Queen, constantly analyzing her body structure. Invisible threads shot out from his palms, instantly wrapping around all the joints of the Ant Queen. The Ant Queen struggled violently, her terrifying strength pulling Qingyu forward unsteadily. He frowned, and then a wave of extreme frost spread along the threads, precisely crystallizing in the areas where the Ant Queen's limbs moved. The frost slowed the Ant Queen's movements, making her resemble a disabled ant with malfunctioning joints, stiffly twisting her body. Large chunks of ice fell from her joints as if she would soon break free. At that moment, Bai Li Pangpang stepped onto the Yaoguang, flying into the air. He pulled out an old-fashioned colorful toy windmill from his pocket and gently blew on it toward the Ant Queen below. The windmill's blades spun rapidly and fierce flames erupted from within, resembling a scorching and terrifying fire tornado that crashed down from the sky. Boom! The fire tornado instantly engulfed the Ant Queen, and a chilling scream erupted from within the flames. The third of her paper-like body was instantly reduced to ashes by the fire. The Ant Queen burst forth from the flames, half of her face completely gone, and the rear half of her body was emitting black smoke. The paper had fully carbonized, drifting away in the air with her movements. This fire only added insult to injury for the already severely wounded Ant Queen. The damaged Ant Queen struggled to stabilize herself, roaring at Lin Chia and the others while slowly retreating to a corner of the palace. At the same time, strange red patterns began to emerge on the surface of her body. Not only her body, but the ground beneath her feet also started to spread with red patterns, resembling writhing blood vessels that continuously devoured the surrounding earth. A bizarre aura erupted from the Ant Queen. Meanwhile, on the cracked ground outside Fingdu, red worker ants were climbing the sheer cliffs when suddenly blood-red patterns appeared on the surface of all the worker ants. Their bodies trembled and they began to swell rapidly like balloons. Bang! One of the worker ants expanded to its limit and suddenly exploded, green blood and severed limbs splattering everywhere, while a strange red light vanished into the void, disappearing without a trace. Then the second worker ant exploded, followed by the third, fourth, fifth. On the ground riddled with countless worker ants, one after another burst like fireworks. A massive amount of red light surged into the void, vanishing completely. Not only the worker ants but the black soldier ants also displayed these patterns. However, unlike the panicked worker ants, they seemed to understand what was about to happen, quietly bowing their bodies to the ground, patiently waiting for their own bodies to explode. Bang bang bang. After the soldier ants exploded, the red light they emitted was 3 times that of the worker ants, instantly vanishing into the void, leaving no trace behind. In the Fingdu Imperial Palace, a torrent of red light surged from the red-patterned ground beneath the Ant Queen, quickly enveloping her body. The red light rapidly integrated into her form, causing her size to double, and her damaged body began to regenerate rapidly. Red carapace coalesced on the surface of her body, as if donning her in a heavy armor. Black scythe-like blades extended from the gaps in the armor, and a pair of long white antennae transformed into a bizarre array of colors, thick and flexible, resembling 2 vibrant giant serpents. Her aura surged at a terrifying speed, going from a state of near death to a preliminary recovery at the Sea Realm, and then climbing to the peak of the Sea Realm, even showing signs of breaking through that barrier to reach the boundless realm. And Qingyu observed this scene, his brow furrowing tightly as if he had realized something. He spoke in a deep voice. Forbidden Ruins Sequence 347, Bloodline Sacrifice. Bloodline Sacrifice? Bai Li Pangpang asked in confusion. By sacrificing the life of a close blood relative, one can replenish their physical deficiencies and enhance their own evil forbidden ruins. However, this forbidden ruin is of little use to ordinary people, as there are only a few close relatives, and the power contained in the bloodline is pitifully small. Even if one were to sacrifice them all at most, it could only allow an ordinary person to break through to the Zhan realm or Qi realm, which is why it is ranked so low. And Qingyu gazed at the Ant Queen before him, his expression extremely grim. However, for an organism like the Ant Queen, which possessed an extraordinary reproductive ability, if she were to sacrifice all those hundreds of soldier and worker ants, she could at least break through to the boundless realm, and it wouldn't be impossible for her to step into the Klein realm. That's outrageous. Bai Li Pangpang exclaimed in shock. There are no weak forbidden ruins, only unsuitable ones. This forbidden ruin paired with the Ant Queen is an absurdly perverse combination. Lin Chia gripped his straight knife tightly, speaking coldly. No matter what, we must interrupt her. If she truly steps into the boundless realm, we will be in danger. And Qingyu shook his head, frowning. The bloodline sacrifice patterns are the source of her power. They are not physical entities. Our attacks may not even. Whoosh. Before he could finish, an arrow whistled past Lin Chia's side. The arrowhead glowed with white light, easily piercing through the red light swirling around the Ant Queen, and it penetrated the thick red carapace as if it were merely poking through a piece of paper, smoothly embedding itself into the dense red patterns. The white light of the arrowhead instantly severed the sacrifice patterns, causing the Ant Queen's body to tremble violently, and her steadily rising aura came to an abrupt halt. Chapter 376, Ancient Tree Demon. Lin Chia and Qingyu and Bai Li Pangpang were all taken aback at the same time, turning their heads to look in the direction from which the arrow had flown. Standing quietly in the corner of the palace was Zhelon, dressed in a loose blue Han robe, holding a light yellow hardwood bough, facing the direction of the Ant Queen, with his fingertips hovering in midair. Seeing the surprised expressions of the three, Zhelon was slightly taken aback, seemingly unable to understand why they were looking at him like that. Boom! A dull crashing sound came from the direction of the Ant Queen, who was furious after her sacrificial ritual was interrupted. She stomped heavily on the ground of the palace, shattering the writhing red patterns beneath her feet. Like a serpent, her antennae wrapped around the feathered arrow embedded in her body, forcefully pulling it out from the cracks in her shell. With an angry roar, she suddenly exerted strength, trying to break the arrow that had disrupted her sacrificial ceremony. With force. The arrow remained completely still. The red-armored Ant Queen was taken aback, and her 2 antennae exerted more force. The arrow still did not budge. The red-armored Ant Queen bared her teeth, her antennae twisting like a pretzel, her massive body trembling slightly. That ordinary feathered arrow remained unmoved. Not even a single feather could be pulled free. Red-armored Ant Queen. She silently tossed the arrow to the corner of the palace, glaring at the few people in front of her, and began to roar ferociously. Bailey Pang Pang looked at this scene with suspicion and said uncertainly, "Why do I feel like she seems to be angry out of shame?" "You don't need to feel that way, she is indeed angry out of shame." Lin Chia's feet were quickly enveloped by a shadowy aura as he calmly spoke. "Right now she's probably at the peak of the sea realm. Although she hasn't broken through to limitless, her combat power should be vastly different from before, so be careful." "Understood." And Qingyu nodded. Without saying a word, the madman Chao Yuan charged at the red-armored Ant Queen with his knife, like a rabid dog. The black aura of his blade slashed against the Ant Queen's red armor, leaving shallow cuts, but it did not break through her defenses like before. The red-armored Ant Queen had long found this dim-witted fool displeasing. Now not only had her injuries healed, but her realm had also risen to the peak of the sea realm. Without any hesitation she directly collided head-on with Chao Yuan. Several long sickle-like black blades shot out from beneath her shell, easily blocking Chao Yuan's strike. Her body was pushed back slightly by Chao Yuan, and then two agile, colorful antennae lashed out, sending the madman Chao Yuan flying several meters. "Stay a bit further away from me." Watching this scene, Lin Chia seemed to think of something and said to Qingyu and Bailey Pang Pang beside him. The two were taken aback. Although they didn't understand what Lin Chia was planning, they still took a few steps back. Lin Chia crouched down, placing one hand on the ground, and suddenly, a dazzling and massive magic circle erupted. Immediately, countless thick tree roots surged from the magic circle, automatically burrowing into the ground, intertwining to form a gigantic trunk with a radius of 4 to 5 meters. This trunk extended wildly towards the sky, stopping only when it nearly reached the top of the hall. Branches extended from the trunk and thorny vines hung down, twisting rapidly in mid-air. Bailey Pang Pang stood nearby, shocked, his mouth agape. "What is this?" "An ancient tree demon." Lin Chia patted the trunk beside him, a newly summoned creature. Previously, Lin Chia had sacrificed over 50 worker ant corpses from the river realm in the primordial forest, gaining an opportunity for dimensional summoning. However, due to Lin Chia's own realm limitations, he could only summon creatures with strength comparable to the river realm. Of course, there were significant differences between the river realms. A summoned creature contracted after sacrificing over 50 river realm ants would naturally possess combat power and potential far beyond that of an ordinary river realm creature. This ancient tree demon was nearly the pinnacle of combat power in this realm. The most crucial point was that its size and strength would increase as Lin Chia's realm grew, potentially even reaching the limitless realm. The only drawback was that summoning this creature took a considerable amount of time, and if in a confined space, its body would likely burst the surrounding environment. The red-armored Ant Queen looked at the massive tree demon that had suddenly appeared in the hall and roared twice, but she did not take it to heart. After all, the difference in realms was evident. She was not afraid of her opponent at all. Of course, Lin Chia was not naive enough to think that he could defeat a peak sea realm Ant Queen with just one summoned creature. Bang! The ground beneath the Ant Queen suddenly exploded, and countless thick tree roots surged from underground, each as thick as a barrel, like bundles of brown giant pythons, reaching for the Ant Queen's body. After evolving, the Ant Queen's antennae seemed to have heightened sensitivity, and she instantly moved away from her original position, darting like a red shadow through the vast hall, as countless vines and roots erupted from the ground, blocking her escape routes. Just as the Ant Queen was maneuvering between the vines, a straight blade concealed among the vines suddenly shifted to hover above her head. Lin Chia's figure appeared out of thin air, descending like a bolt of lightning wrapped in night. Clay! The blades of his dual knives clashed against the sharp edges on the Ant Queen's body, sparking dazzling flashes. The Ant Queen's form sank slightly under Lin Chia's assault, but with her terrifying strength she still managed to block the strike. Two antennae twisted in midair, then lashed out at Lin Chia's body like long whips. Lin Chia didn't even glance at the two antennae, for in the next moment, several frost-covered threads accurately predicted the trajectory of the antennae, pulling them tightly in midair from another direction. And Qingyu flicked her fingertips and threads wrapped around the antennae, quickly covering the two thick antennae in ice. Thunder rumbled and lightning crackled. Lin Chia softly chanted, and dark thunder erupted from between his blades, surging into the body of the red-armored ant queen. Her body trembled slightly, becoming rigid. At the same time, numerous vines and tree trunks tightly bound her body, imprisoning her in place like an ancient wooden prison, unable to move. Lin Chia took a deep breath and forcefully plunged his straight blade into the red-armored ant queen's red armor. The blade sank into her body and extreme darkness surged wildly into her, eroding all her internal organs and flesh. The excruciating pain from the dark erosion drove the ant queen nearly insane, her piercing screams echoing throughout the hall, and in a berserk state she forcibly tore apart some of the vines, her sharp blades rapidly cutting through the air, creating a whirlwind of blades before her.